Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. We got to the end of the transfer window and it was a pretty good one. Technically, there's another transfer window, which we're currently in, the domestic transfer window where Premier League clubs can, trade with EFL clubs. But, that was the main one. We got through it and you know what? It was pretty darn good for Tottenham Hotspur. It really was. Yes, we didn't get the centre-back, that maybe would have been the icing or the cherry on top of the cake. But Tottenham smashed Man United 6-1 on Sunday. Yeah, kind of balanced it up slightly in terms of the good feeling stakes. And I tell you what, they are absolutely buzzing inside Tottenham Hotspur Football Club right now. Such a good feeling right now. They feel that they're on a winning momentum. The performances, the goals are flying in. Still even haven't got a certain Gareth Bale back in action yet. And they're very, very happy with what they did in the transfer window. And like I say, there's still a few little bit more things to be done in this domestic window, which we'll come on to later. But this is kind of a transfer window wrap, as it were. It's not going to be me, laying down some sick beats or anything like that. It's very much going to be me just talking about transfer window. No wrapping involved. Probably best for everyone involved, quite frankly. It would be shocking. So, how should we do this? Let's start from the beginning first. We'll have a little bit of a kind of a look. Anyone that's obviously is a regular video of these videos, you hopefully I've been kind of bringing you as much as I can information of what's been going on. Behind the scenes is the expression, isn't it? But, a little bit more involved insight, hopefully, into various deals. If you're new to this, then hopefully you'll learn various more things about certain deals that Spurs did or couldn't do that you'll learn today. And if not, hopefully there's little bits and pieces that even people that have seen lots of these will know. But let's just talk about the window as a whole. Would I say Tottenham won the window? Yes, there's no trophy involved before we get all excited over that. Probably. I think Chelsea did an incredible job in terms of bringing in some amazing young talent, Kai Havertz is like a generational talent. A lot of people who are real Bundesliga experts have said, and we know Timo Werner's a great player. But I'd say Tottenham, having spent a fraction of what Chelsea spent, have probably fixed every major issue in their squad. Yes, of course, we'd have liked a centre-back, specifically one that could play on the left of the pairing. But as I'll come to that a little bit later, that probably wasn't an absolute priority for Spurs. It was left very deliberately until the end as a, hopefully if we can, that would be great and it would just finish things off. But I don't think not getting that centre-back, there may be one coming, which we'll come to, although a very different kind of centre-back. I don't think not getting that top quality, top draw, ready for the now centre-back really should impact too much on how successfully we view this window, because I think it was a terrific window. I think it was a window when Spurs, Daniel Levy came out very clearly at the start of the window and said, it's unrealistic to even be thinking about transfer stories in the papers right now when everything that's going on. And, Spurs certainly after, essentially at first furloughing staff and then having to reverse that decision. After doing all of that, there was no way Tottenham were going to go into this window and spend £100 million, whatever. It was always going to be a very carefully calculated window, which, as I understand it, was a lot of the planning was put in January. A lot of these moves were kind of set up then. It's certainly the ones, or some of the ones that were pretty quick to go before season started. And then other times, there's a little bit of luck involved. Spurs maybe will point to the fact that they haven't had certain things go their way, they might say, in transfers. Whereas this summer, which we'll come to, certain little things just clicked and dropped in their favour, as it were. So yeah, they're very, very happy behind the scenes. Mourinho's happy with what he's got. Club are happy with what they've done. And yeah, you look at, I saw a chart, I think it was on Sky Sports News the other day, of how much each team had spent. Spurs are like about halfway. Yet I would say, I still believe had the best window. Because that is the key to a transfer window for me. Is you go out and you improve, you fix problems as a priority. And then also, if you can, you improve or upgrade things in your squad. And I think Spurs have done both. 4 of those 6 transfers are starting 11 players. It's Mourinho wanted a balanced squad. I still think there's a couple more departures to come, but that is definitely a much more balanced squad. He can now go into matches and have options in every single position. He couldn't say that last season at all. So let's start at the beginning. Certain Danish chap, Pierre-Emile Hoybier. Obviously, that was one that was sorted. Well, early talks were done in January over bringing him from Southampton. It wasn't possible then. His contract situation, that played a big role. Essentially, he was into his final year. Southampton knew they couldn't get a lot from him, for him, and he wanted to move on. He wanted to join Tottenham. It had been very, very clear that was where he wanted to go. There was talk of an Everton bid. Everton never really got that off the ground because he wanted to come to Tottenham. And I think Hoybier, for me, is the perfect embodiment of the kind of player Tottenham were looking for in this window. And that was players with a really strong mentality, leadership qualities, because that was something Mourinho, Spurs, and this is no secret, we're not revealing big secrets here, ever since the Champions League final, probably in the Premier League beforehand as well, in those probably 6 months before, it's no secret that Tottenham have crumbled mentally a lot. Whether it was just a case of we've reached the pinnacle and we can't really go any further than this when they got to Champions League final, I don't know. Whether, it was a very different Poch towards the end and perhaps that kind of resonated down. He wasn't as, what's the best word? Probably optimistic as he once was, and maybe just becomes stale. It's as simple as that, as anyone would be in a job approaching 6 years in it. And I think there had to be a dressing room change. We myself included, and I'm sure fans out there as well were saying it, that ultimately if you change managers and you're getting the similar kind of either performances or collapses towards the end of the game, that's the players. You can no longer keep looking at the manager. So for me, from what I understand, that was very much a clear decision this window. Let's go out, let's bring in players who are not going to stand for that. You've got the likes of Lloris and Kane in the dressing room, big, strong, influential voices. You've lost Vertonghen, who was another kind of big leader in the team. So you had to bring in new people, new blood, ones that had been there and had won things, and weren't going to take any rubbish, quite frankly. They weren't going to accept people just giving up possession, not tracking back, things like that. And I think you'll see it in a lot of these names we're about to go through, the 6 names. I'd probably say almost all of them are exactly of that type. And even the one that's not, there's a little kind of story there which we'll come to. So Hoybier, been at Bayern Munich, won big things, was a favourite of Pep's, got the quality. God, he's got the quality. Did you see that through ball to Sergio Rey on Sunday at Old Trafford? Wow. But what I think about him was, I've been quite privileged, obviously, to be able to go into grounds and, report on matches. And what you get to see, despite how it's rubbish not having the fans there, one positive side effect is that you can obviously hear the players really clearly. Hoybier, as I've said before, does not shut up. He just keeps going. He keeps encouraging. Bravo is one of his favourite things. He's got it from Mourinho. Mourinho likes that word, and Hoybier uses it a lot. There was lots of bravo Ben, bravo Harry, and stuff like that. You just hear it all the time. He's always over to people, putting his arms around them, and you can just imagine off the pitches like that. Whenever he speaks, we had an interview with him after the game. It's very much, we need more, this kind of attitude. This was great, but we can be better. And that's exactly what Mourinho's driving at. Tottenham have been a terrific team under Pochettino, but they just need more. They do. There's just that next level. And, when you look at the deal for Hoybier as well, with Kyle Walker-Peters going the other way, it wasn't quite a swap deal. I think for kind of accountancy reasons, they did it as 2 separate things. But essentially, if you're going to look at who goes what and what prices, Hoybier came into Tottenham for £3 million, really, in cash terms. Obviously, KWP is an asset, so you are losing money in that. But £3 million for a player who, I think if there were any doubts perhaps in the opening matches while he was getting his fitness, have been blown out of the water in the last week. For me, against Newcastle and Man United, he was absolutely stellar. Superb. I mean, what I'm quite intrigued now is to see was, I originally thought he'd come in and play the anchor role. then he came in and he kind of played this mad, energetic pressing role all over the pitch. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not quite what I expected. But then against Newcastle and United, he's kind of reverted back to that anchorman role, and he's been amazing. He's just been mopping up everything in front of the back four, and like I say, can still deliver that kind of creative first-time ball through to Aurier. He's been fantastic, and you can see him getting fitter. Brilliant purchase, I think. It's, I rated all the transfers today, and I gave him a 9 out of 10 for a transfer, because I just think for the price involved, for the type of player Spurs are looking for, only 25, was Southampton captain, really is captain material at Tottenham, potentially in the future. And Tottenham just puff their chests out a little bit more when he's on the pitch. He just gives them that little bit more of kind of, we've got to do this, guys, kind of thing. And I think that's been so important. I think he's going to be a great purchase. Transfer number 2, Joe Hart. Now, he was one that came slightly out of left field in terms of... I think I did an article way back when I was looking at free transfers that Spurs could potentially pick up in what would be a tough financial summer. And Joe Hart was actually one of those players. I'm not taking massive credit for it because he was among others. He was among other goalkeepers. Like I think Ben Foster was in there as well. And there was another former England keeper whose name's completely gone out of my head. But yeah, so I suggested if you're looking for a big game mentality, great experience, has won things, perhaps not at the top of his game anymore, well, definitely not at the top of his game anymore, I think that's fair to say, then I thought he was a good one to look at. I didn't actually expect they would, but they did. And I think another one you look at, and it kind of makes sense. Wages-wise, apparently he's on less than Michel Vorm was on. So they've upgraded. I don't want to be too, disrespectful to Vorm, but I think it still is an upgrade because I think Vorm, unfortunately, a lot of it was due to rustiness, but he just wasn't at the level Spurs needed anymore. And I think Hart is an upgrade on that. He's a younger goalkeeper. He's probably, you could argue, been at a better level as well in the past. Former England international. And like Hoybier, he doesn't shut up. He's constantly organising the back four, constantly telling people up the pitch what's happening behind them and stuff like that. And he actually, he's had some good performances. I wouldn't say he's done anything particularly wrong either since he's come in. He's looked steady enough, made some good saves. And I think that's a good deal. And it's potentially could financially be a clever one because of potential departure, which we'll come to later as well. But yeah, I think the Hart one, it kind of got slightly divided opinion. But I do think in terms of fitting the profile Tottenham were looking for at the time, free transfer, less wages than Vorm, homegrown, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. And you just, another voice like that in the changing room who's won things and demands the most, that can't be a bad thing. Then we come to Matt Doherty. Matt Doherty, it's just such a bargain. I still, you see me pause there, it's because I'm still trying to get my head around the deal that actually Tottenham did. So Matt Doherty was the second most creative right back, or full-back, wing-back, whatever you want to call it, in the Premier League over the last 2 seasons, just behind Trent Alexander-Arnold. Tottenham got him for 13.5 million with no add-ons. It's, there's an agent connection there. He's is it Jorge Mendes? Or Jorge Mendes? Client. People know my pronunciation issues. It's a real issue for me. But Mendes is his client, is his agent. Is it Gestefute, the agency, is also represents Mourinho. It's very incestuous in that sort of element. But the deal was done. That was a fun one to report on because I reported it at the time, and Wolves fans went mad at me. No way on earth are you ever going to get him for that. Never. He's worth 40, 50 million. He's never going for that kind of price. He did. 28-year-old. I think it's been quite interesting for him. I think we're starting to see the proper Matt Doherty now. I think he has had the real issue of Wolves had a later season, Europa League. He came back straight into his holiday. And then Spurs signed him while he was on his holiday. And he came from his holiday, did his shirt stuff, did all of the videos, that very clever laptop video about being an Arsenal fan before, and then headed straight off for Republic of Ireland duty. So he had no pre-season. And so for him, it's been very much a case of kind of getting his fitness up, getting his sharpness up, getting back to where he was, all while being at a new club. So I think we saw in the opening week or so, maybe two, you just saw a player still trying to catch his breath almost. And the big thing for him, we had a really good little press conference with him ahead of... It was the second... I don't think... Or it might have been Maccabi Haifa, actually. Or was that Winksy? That makes sense. So many press conferences, so many games, so many press conferences. Anyway, we spoke to him before a European game, and it was quite interesting, his little insight into playing right back compared to playing as a wing back, which he did for Wolves. And he just said, essentially, there's a lot more fitness stuff. You know, he's having to get up and down the pitch and defend. He's having to kind of go back to basics where he was. So for a guy that wasn't on the right level fitness-wise, to be taken on a role that's more involved physically, you know, it's been an experience for him, but I think he's getting better from that. And what I want to say about him, and we'll come to it with Reguilon in a minute as well, the difference in having two top right fullbacks on both sides is pushing the other players. Serge Aurier, for me, against United, I'd probably say best performance in a Tottenham shirt. And people will know how critical I've been of Aurier. Certainly his defending, and certainly his concentration and consistency levels. Against United, he was fantastic, both ends of the pitch. And I feel he's been like that in both of his performances this season as well. Both, it might be 3 now. I think he's been excellent. And I think Ben Davies, since Reguilon came in, has really raised his performance, and in an attacking sense. So Aurier has actually become better defensively. Davies has become better offensively. I think he's had 3 assists since Reguilon's come in. So who would have thought competition actually makes players better? Take note, Tottenham Hotspur. Well, I suppose you did. So Doherty for me is a really astute purchase. He's a player that Mourinho, again, he was one that he kind of marked out very early on before the window started. I want him. He's caused issues galore for me when I've been manager of United and Spurs, and I want him to be on my side rather than the opposing side. And, you know, I think we'll get to see more of Doherty in the kind of coming into the back end of the penalty box and getting on the end of Reguilon crosses. I think that's going to be a feature as well this season. They've got so much going forward now, Tottenham. It is mouth-watering. It really is. Next, Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale came home. If you weren't aware, the Welshman is back. And if you ever want an example, if you thought Matt Doherty was a bargain by a great bit of negotiating by Daniel Levy into Gareth Bale, honestly, that is one of the most phenomenal pieces of chairman negotiation. He gets his flack, Levy, and I do think sometimes his negotiation prevents Tottenham from doing deals. But in this case, you've just got to take your hat off and absolutely give it to the man, because he got Gareth Bale, one of the world's best players still, even at 31. He got Gareth Bale on loan for a season with an option for a second season, and Tottenham are just paying 40% roughly of his wages. Then on top of that, when it was discovered the extent of Bale's knee injury that he picked up on international duty, Levy renegotiated things and managed to get it so that, in essence, Real Madrid were paying Tottenham's share of the wages until he recovered. That is just, you know, it's Gareth Bale. We're not talking about some journeyman lower league player, some kind of, you know, deal thrown together. This is incredible, and it's taking complete advantage of Madrid's desperation to get him out the door and just get any of his wages off the structure there at the Bernabeu so that they can bring in other players. And it's an amazing deal. And the way Tottenham are seeing it is, in Bale, it's like the best... I've used this analogy a couple of times, but similarly, it's like having this high-level performance sports car, but you've had it stuck in the garage under a cover, wrapped up, put away for about a year. Underneath it, it is ready to be driven and fly down, you know, wherever. So that's what Bale's been. He's been underused, underappreciated. Now it's just a case of warming him up and getting him out there. And, oh my goodness, you know, you're going to get a guy that you'd think a lot of the injury issues he's had, kind of such an inactive season, hopefully a lot of those issues, maybe, fingers crossed, will have kind of cleared up, and you'll get to see a top-level Bale. There's such an excitement around the training ground. Apparently, people behind the scenes have been watching him. Justin, he's working outdoors now, and just been blown away by what they're seeing. This is a guy, take away the fact that he's world-class, that he's still got his pace, that he can score spectacular free kicks, goals from distance, can put balls into the box on Harry Kane's head or Son's head at any moment. He's also won it all. 4 Champions Leagues, I think 3 Club World Cups. He's won La Liga, won the Copa del Rey. He has won everything going, and now he wants to come back to Tottenham Hotspur. And that he was a big driver in the steal as well. Don't forget Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale made it very clear to Jonathan Barnett, his agent. This is the same Jonathan Barnett who would laugh at Tottenham in previous years, because Spurs have tried many a year to get Gareth Bale back. Of course they have, but it was never financially viable. They even inserted a clause in his deal when he went to Real Madrid in 2013, saying that if they would have first option on bringing him back. That expired in 2019, and ironically, it's the following summer they've been able to do it. But Bale wanted to come home. He really did. And that meant any other interested parties just weren't really in the race. He knew he'd come back to Tottenham, he'd be loved, wanted, play under one of the best managers in the world, play with one of the best squads in Europe now, and in the best stadium, probably the best football stadium in the world, and at the best training facilities, which he just got to experience kind of for a season before he headed off. But they obviously wouldn't have even looked like what it looks like now. It's so expanded and so complete now, pretty much. Although there are some planning applications for other little bits and pieces, which I'll talk about in future videos. I've got to look into that. The little alterations, improvements they're making to the training ground, or want to anyway. So yeah, Bale is back, and I don't know about you guys, but I look at what's happening out there on the pitch for Tottenham Hotspur right now, what Son and Kane are doing. Put Gareth Bale up there as well. No offence to Lucas Moura, because he works incredibly hard. You swap Lucas Moura for Gareth Bale, best front three in Europe. Obviously, you've got the Liverpool guys. I think Bale, Kane and Son, I think you'd struggle to find many people that would disagree with that as the best front three out there. And it's all now on Mourinho and how he makes that work behind that three, because you're not leaving any of those three out. You're just not. We'll have a little talk about that, about the strongest 11 at the end. Hopefully I'll remember. It wasn't something I was planning to do, but actually it's be quite a nice topic just to finish off with. So Gareth Bale. I could go on about Gareth Bale forever. So I'm not. I'm going to move on now. I'm going to move on. We'll hopefully see Gareth Bale against West Ham. Hopefully. That's what they're aiming for. If not, maybe the European game after against... it's Belgium, isn't it? Royal Antwerp. Sergio Reguilon. We saw him first because he did that terrific video where at the end he called up and said, "It's your turn, my friend." And it was Gareth coming along. Reguilon is brilliant. I said this at the time, I really hope the Bale deal didn't overshadow what a coup Tottenham managed to do in getting Sergio Reguilon through the door. This guy, 23 years old, one of the top left-backs in Europe, and if anyone again had any doubt that that was the case, you just watch him against Chelsea and Manchester United. Phenomenal. Pace to burn, can defend, can get up the pitch, can set up goals, can take a shot at goal as well. And I think you saw a lot about his character against Chelsea. He made a mistake early on, gave the ball to Azpilicueta. It didn't affect him. Mourinho said this afterwards. He said, if anything, players will go downwards after that. He only got better from that point on. And we've seen he's an incredibly confident guy. You see him on the pitch. He's always shouting and talking to people. And if you saw the penalty shootout, the first person when Mount missed to run and jump on Hugo Lloris was Sergio Reguilon, the new guy. If you saw his initiation video as well, he's a very exuberant guy. Good singer. Superb one. And I mean, Tottenham, I've said this before, so apologies if you heard this before, but Tottenham went into this window not really with any intention of buying a left-back. They were happy enough with what they had. But what they did make very clear while they were planning everything was like, well, we'll put just a little circle and asterisk here. If Sergio Reguilon becomes available for a decent price, we have to try. And I think it speaks volumes about how much they wanted him, that Real Madrid were only willing to let him go for about 28 million after that amazing season with Sevilla, top 4 in La Liga, won the Europa League. They were only willing to let him go if this buyback clause was inserted, which states that Real Madrid can buy back Sergio Reguilon in the summer of 2021 or the summer of 2022 for a deal that would mark around a £15 million profit for whoever bought him. Man United kind of were like, well, we're not going near that. Tottenham thought, you know what? We want him so much. He's such a talent. He can make such an impact in the now. Let's get him. Financially, we'll make a profit if he does go, but hopefully he will absolutely fall in love with Tottenham Hotspur and he will love playing for us. We'll make him a star, even more of a star. He will play almost, he will pretty much be the strongest 11 first choice starter. And, at Real Madrid, he's currently got 2 players ahead of him. What's to say that's still not going to be the case next year or the year after? The player has to decide. This isn't a case of Real Madrid ordering him back home. He has to decide whether he goes. We're not talking about slaves here. They're footballers. They're allowed to have a say in this. So I think it's a terrific deal. I think the buyback clause probably knocks it down just 1 mark for me, because obviously it does mean that if he does want to go, he's a Madrid boy. He may tell himself that he could still be a star there and make it. I just hope, like the clubs hope, that he becomes a star at Tottenham and just doesn't want to go anywhere, because he's fantastic. Honestly, I've been so taken by him so far. His adaptation to the Premier League and the physicality has been brilliant. He'll have off days. He's a young player. He's 23. Of course he will. Hopefully the fans will stick with him. We know how fans are. They probably won't. They'll probably be up and down like they are with many young players, but we're all guilty of that. But I think he'll be a superb addition to Tottenham Hotspur. And like I say, has kicked Ben Davies on as well. Carlos Vinicius, he was the last one. Do not adjust your sets. Tottenham did bring in a striker. They really did. After 14 months of, since Fernando Llorente left, Tottenham brought in a striker. And the great thing about him is that he was Mourinho's choice from the start. I mean, it's kind of obvious when you look at his profiles. Big 6'3" lad, very much built for the Premier League. He, again, a Mendes client. Again, there's a link there again. And he was the one Mourinho wanted. Spurs went in earlier in the window for him at Benfica. But unfortunately, Benfica, then in a position of strength, asked for around 50 million. Tottenham were like, money's tight. We're not going to spend that. They then went on a bit of a dance around Europe and the Premier League. They made inquiries with so many clubs, agents and intermediaries. They inquired about Danny Ings at Southampton. They inquired about Andrea Bellotti at Torino. They inquired about Patson Daka at RB Salzburg. They inquired about Haris Seferovic at Benfica as well. They looked at Habib Diallo at Metz. They also looked at other homegrown options. Callum Wilson, Ollie Watkins, both considered. Well, with Wilson, it was more his injuries. They didn't think 20 million, he was perhaps at 28 was a little bit of a risk with his injuries. And with Watkins, they just felt 33 million was just too much for a championship player. To be fair to both of those players, they've started superbly in the Premier League. But Tottenham just felt value-wise over a considerable amount of time, they might not be the ones. So, and then the other one was Milik at Napoli. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his first name because I will get it so wrong. So, he was the backup. He was the one where if they just could not get Vinicius, they were going to get Milik, or they were going to try to. It's really interesting. I think I read today, just before I did this, that Napoli have been so desperate to try and essentially farm out Milik somewhere that he hasn't actually been registered in their Serie A squad or European squad, I think, which kind of says a lot. Everyone was like, oh, he's the one we must get. No one's really nibbled at that, have they? There was speculation over his medical at Roma and why that fell apart. That was obviously never proved. But there's obviously something there that is putting off clubs. I don't know what it is. I know his wage demands when Tottenham made their early inquiries were not particularly great. They weren't really what Tottenham were looking at. But then, as I said earlier, that little bit of luck happened for Spurs. Benfica, not luck for them, they failed to get into the Champions League. They crashed out in the qualifying stages. And suddenly, they needed money. Ruben Dias went off to Man City. Levy seized the initiative, thinking I can get Jose's man, went back in, and instead of a £50 million deal, Spurs have brought in Carlos Vinicius, £2.7 million loan. Try before you buy, and if he's a star, sign him for £38 million. It is a phenomenal deal. Again, every one of these deals has got. You could probably argue, you could say the Reguilon one's the one that maybe is loaded in the other team's favour than Spurs. Every single other one has just been a ridiculous piece of negotiation. And like I say with Reguilon, I think it just was one that had to be done. So Vinicius is here, 24 goals, 13 assists last season. He's a bit of a late bloomer. He's 25, Brazilian, but he's a centre-back, really. Essentially, only not too long ago. He's converted to being a striker. Last season was the breakthrough season. Joint top scorer in Liga NOS at Portugal. And, you know, Spurs finally have another option to Harry Kane that can play. He can play out wide if required. This is different. A lot of people were saying about Josh King. It's like, Josh King is a bit like Lucas and Son, that but I'd probably say not on the same level, but he's a wide man or support striker who can play as a striker. Carlos Vinicius is a striker, very much first and foremost now, who can play out wide. And that gives tactical flexibility for Mourinho. He can play him alongside Kane. He can play him instead of him when he needs a rest. He can bring him on late in matches for just a bit of more of a bruising, 6'3" presence up there. He's going to put himself about, and he knows how to score a goal. And he has that celebration. I said last week about bringing this iconic celebration to the Premier League. He's kind of stealing it and bringing it to the Premier League. It is, of course, Mbappe's. I knew it was vaguely familiar, and I just couldn't think where. Of course, Kylian Mbappe's one, the old crossing his arms. So that was Tottenham's window. There were, not failures, that's probably a hard word to say. Towards the end, they wanted to get that centre-back. It's no secret that technical performance director Steve Hitchen went out to Italy, tried to do a deal with Inter Milan for Milan Skriniar. It just didn't work. They went back in late on, made an inquiry, but the deal was dead. It just wasn't going to happen. Too much of a difference. Inter wanted 45 million, Spurs more around the 32 million plus add-ons, and it just didn't happen. It was possibly one hopefully they'll look at again in January, because the player was very keen on coming, but it just wasn't going to happen in that late stage. Inter, weren't willing to let him go, and also he was playing. He was starting matches. Even the day before deadline day, he started against Lazio, I think it was. So that just didn't happen. They inquired about Demiral at Juventus as well, young 22-year-old Turkish defender who had his injury issues. Juventus not willing to let him go. There was some little dalliance that maybe they could have brought in Antonio Rudiger from Chelsea, but it never really got off the ground. Too many complications on various levels, really. So the centre-back didn't happen, which, of course, that would have made it a perfect window. But I'd still say it was an incredible transfer window. And like I say, it's not quite done yet. The domestic window is open. Joe Rodon is a young 22-year-old Welsh centre-back from Swansea. He's one that they're looking at. Some people got a little bit excited on deadline day, saying this was going to be a deadline day signing at the last minute. It was never going to be. It was more someone that they inquired about. As of the last kind of time I'd kind of asked around, there was still no bid actually made for Joe Rodon. He's one they are interested in. Apparently, Swansea valuing him at almost 20 million. That's never going to happen for that price in a million years. Tottenham are not going to sign him for that. If he is going to move to Tottenham, it'll be for far less. I think Tottenham see him more beneath the £10 million mark. This is a guy that he's been playing in the Championship, obviously, but we're not talking about a £20 million player just yet. But I completely understand why players would want to protect their assets in that way. So keep an eye on that situation. Spurs have got until there's 11 days after the transfer window closed. They've got to tie up any deals with EFL clubs. So they may look to bring him in this window, if not a later one. I'd imagine they probably will try to do it this window just for that extra bit of cover. But what I would say about him, it's too late for the Europa League squad, so he wouldn't be. That's all been registered last night, so he wouldn't be in that anyway. There's some disparity over whether he's technically homegrown or not, because he's kind of in the same boat. Well, he's exactly the same boat as Ben Davies, in that obviously he came through with a Welsh club. But there's a strange quirk that I've got to kind of fully investigate. But I think because Swansea and Cardiff switched to having a lot of their elements of their control went to the English FA. I think it was around 2012. People after that then benefited from being associated trained, whereas Davies, technically, he begun his training with that club before that point. So I think that could be the case with him, which would mean he still wouldn't be a B-list player, so he's not someone that you don't even have to register until before a match. You'd have to put him on there as an association-trained player. But yeah, if Spurs were to bring him in, then in January, if they're through to knockout stage, which we hope they are, he could then be put into the team. I'd say, we're not... I think he's a big talent. Certainly, apparently, Davies and Bale both think he's a big talent. He's been part of the Wales squad. I wouldn't imagine you're looking at a player to go straight into the first team like a Skriniar Demirel or Vertonghen, I was going to say, Rudiger. I think you're looking at a guy that would probably play in cup matches, things like that. The FA Cup in January would start to kind of build into the team that way. I don't think you're looking at a guaranteed straight away first team starter, but certainly a very talented player. So let's see what happens with him. I spoke about, just kind of touched on there, the Europa League squad. Spurs 2 over in their foreign player limit at the moment. I was kind of expecting, I think it's going to be Jensen and Fernandes and Paulo Gazzaniga left out. That was the vibes I was getting before the decision was made. So it may have been changed. I think we'll probably find out quite close to this video come out exactly who got left out. But I think they were the two that looked to be on the chopping block, as it were. And when you kind of look at the squad, I can kind of see why. There's not really anyone else you could leave out and kind of feel comfortable with that decision. Not that it's an easy decision in any way anyway, but we'll see whether they do end up being the two. Let's talk very quickly about people that went out the door. Kyle Walker-Peters, I was sad to see that because I think he's proving now what a good right-back he is. But he wanted a fresh start. He wanted to play matches, and Mourinho and Pochettino before him just didn't see him as a consistent starter. So fair play to him. He's going out there and doing exactly what we hoped he would. And Tottenham used him as part of the Hoybier deal, so it kind of worked out. Juan Foyth gone to Villarreal on loan. He signed a new 3-year contract. That was a little bit of a kind of a misnomer slightly in that he's gone out there with an option. I think it's 13.5 million that Villarreal can buy him for next summer. And if you saw Juan Foyth's Instagram post, he's kind of essentially said goodbye. He thinks he's going. Again, for me, a bit of a missed opportunity there. Pochettino said he could be one of the best defenders in Europe. Hasn't quite happened for him, but I still think there's incredible out of potential. And I'd love to have seen him in a defensive midfield role. I think it'd been great. Ryan Sessegnon has moved on to Hoffenheim on loan. There's no option to buy him there. Spurs still have high hopes. Mourinho still thinks that he can challenge Reguilon and be alongside Davies for that left-back role in the future. It's now, they wanted to get a club that would play him in that kind of role, or at least a wing-back role. They had lots of interest from the Premier League, teams across Europe, and essentially Hoffenheim presented the best option because they need a left wing-back. They're really short. They've been playing a guy, I can't remember his name, a right-footed guy, I think it's a right winger, as their left wing-back. They need Sessegnon. Sessegnon will play matches, he will get his confidence, he will develop, and he will come back exactly how Tottenham want him to be. I think it's a good deal all round. I'd have liked to have seen him stay and fight for his place had Bale and Reguilon and, not Bale, Son and Reguilon down that left. He's not going to get in either of those spots, is he really? So it does make sense, and it's a good deal for him. And in terms of younger players in the first team, there's lots of development players, but first team, Oliver Skipp, he just wanted to go out on loan. He wanted to develop. Mourinho loves him, thinks he'll be a future Tottenham captain, but he went off. He's gone to Norwich, smashing it. Voted their player of the month in the first in September. Norwich fans love him. He's been absolutely rock steady in the Championship. England under-21 international regular now. I think he will come back a big talent. I'm really excited about how Skippy's going to come back. Troy Parrott gone to Millwall. Had a bit of a tough start because he was flying in pre-season, then picked up a kind of a really annoying injury that kept him out for a few weeks, kept him out of Ireland duty the first time they were called up. Then, he's come back. I think he played 45 minutes against Burnley in the Carabao Cup, but he'll massively benefit from playing at Millwall in a tough physical league like the Championship. Let's see where he comes back next summer as well. I hope he smashes it because we know what talent he's got. It's just about applying that now to the men's game, as it were. Still to go out the door, we know Danny Rose is still there. Danny Rose, Porto registered an interest in him. That didn't happen or hasn't happened thus far. I think with Danny Rose, it's an awkward one. He's certainly not going to be asking Daniel Levy anything from Milan at the moment. Just a serious lack of interest in a guy who, it's such a shame where he was to where he is now, over a decade at the club, and he's not really going to be. He's not even training with the first team, so he's not going to be playing any part in matches for the foreseeable future. I personally hope he really lowers his sights slightly and maybe goes to a championship club. Maybe Bournemouth, who are interested with him, come back in, because otherwise I wouldn't be stunned if perhaps him and Spurs just decide to just cancel his contract like West Ham have done with Wilshere, because I can't see any good that comes of him just sitting there for the next, whatever it is, 8 months or so, or even till January, I guess. It doesn't really work. Cameron Carter-Vickers, he'll head off somewhere, whether it's on loan or permanent, we'll see, but it should be in the EFL window. Jack Clarke, whether Mourinho decides to keep him as just work on his development, he liked the look of him in pre-season, it was quite bright at times, or whether, Birmingham very interested in him, whether he lets him go out on loan at least till January maybe. Personally, I think the loan would probably benefit him better. He's got so many bodies ahead of him. And then you wonder about Paulo Gazzaniga. Potentially, Spurs were certainly looking to offload him on deadline day. Like I say, Hart ahead of him. He's a foreign player that probably isn't going to get in that Europa League squad unless there's been a big change of mind. And, he wants to play minutes as well. Of course, he must want to play minutes. So I'd be interested to see whether an EFL club, or I think the Dutch window's still open, or someone comes in for him or not. It'd be interesting to see. Jedson, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be tough for him to get minutes now, especially if he doesn't get in that Europa League squad. I'm sure Spurs would have looked at possibilities of ending that loan, but I don't think there is. I think it's quite an expensive loan. So I think you just have to kind of keep him on, as he's a very versatile guy. He may come in handy as injuries pile up and the fixtures come close together as well. So let's see what happens in this kind of remaining time. Interesting week, this one, because obviously we've got the international break, but there's lots of players who will be at Hotspur Way. I think a lot of them are having a little bit of a break at the moment, and then they'll be coming into Hotspur Way. But you've got Son's not gone on international duty. Gareth Bale, we know, is working there. Carlos Vinicius, Lucas Moura, Dele Alli. Ndombele is going to have 2 weeks more of fitness work. He's been fantastic. I'm so delighted to see how good Tonga Ndombele has been. Mourinho, I feel weird because I keep asking Mourinho about him, just because I'm excited about him. You can sense Mourinho's getting excited about him as well. And he loves the questions about him. He just keeps saying he said he's incredible. He said he's going to be phenomenal. He says he can still get fitter. And these 2 weeks, you're going to see Ndombele on that treadmill. My God, or whatever exercise they get him doing, because he was brilliant against Man U. Had Pogba in his shadow. He really did. He was brilliant. So let's see what happens with Ndombele. But he looks lean. He looks hungry. He did a little interview with RMC Sport in France the other day, saying that him and Mourinho have put their egos aside for the good of the team, and it's working. It really is. It's fantastic. He's such a talent. I'm so excited to see kind of what he does with a bit more fitness. So that he's back, Lamella's back around, Hart will be around, Sissoko's around, Gazzaniga obviously as well. There's a lot of players that Mourinho can properly work with once they've had their little rest, and that bodes well for the West Ham game, because like I say, I think you'll have Bale there. Lo Celso pulled out of Argentina duty with a muscle injury. Tanganga pulled out of England on 21 duty, so we'll see whether they're serious or not, or whether they can work with the group. But Mourinho is probably going to get like a little mini 2-week pre-season with some of these players as well. It's all so positive around Tottenham, isn't it great? We had lots of season last year where it was so down and so depressing at times, and just, ups and downs and roller coasters, and never quite the Tottenham that we'd hoped we were going to see after what happened under Pochettino. And it just feels this real positivity at the club. Before I go, let's do my strongest 11. Sorry, I'm going to do my take on Mourinho's strongest 11 right now. I think it's Lloris in goal. I think it's a back four of Doherty, which is tough with Aurier at the moment. Doherty, I'd say Sanchez for the pace. Dyer, because Mourinho loves him and he can play on the left. Reguilon. I'm going for an incredibly sexy midfield three of Hoybier sitting behind Lo Celso and Ndombele. And then up front, Son, Kane, Bale. That's a phenomenal team. Possibly you could argue the defence needs a bit of work in the centre, but other than that, that's an incredible starting 11. And you can't even start to think what that bench is going to look like, because the bench is packed with talent. People aren't going to get on that bench that you're going to think, my God, they're incredible players. Phenomenal. It's so exciting, and let's see what happens in the rest of the EFL window. Then West Ham, who have had a bit of an upturn in form themselves, they're going to play their hearts out. They always do in London derbies against Tottenham. But yeah, good stuff. Really is exciting. You can probably see I can't hide how excited I am. I love it. Really enjoyed the transfer window. It's been an absolute pleasure as a journalist to finally have a transfer window I can write about stuff as well. Last season was decent, last summer. January we had a couple, but obviously we had those windows with nothing happening. This one, it was like bang, great deal, and it was superb. So hopefully you enjoyed coming along with me for the ride on the transfer window. Like I say, we'll have more in this domestic window. And obviously I'll keep doing videos every week. We'll talk about performances, we'll talk about players, we'll talk about what's coming next, we'll talk about everything. It's Tottenham Hotspur. There's always something to talk about. So hopefully I've packed everything I can in there. Sorry it's gone on a bit longer than normal, past the 45-minute mark. But hopefully you enjoyed it or at least got something out of it. And I shall catch you later. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. I shall talk to you later. Bye.